Um,
Again, Dr. McGill, thank you for everything that you've done and your staff. I mean, good
Yes,
grief. And then
absolutely.
fellow commissioners, thank y'all for taking times out of your busy lives to do this morning.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us. And just so we, can see who's here, we've got our Academic Affairs Committee, and Commissioner Larry Turner is the chair. Commissioner Ann Sermon is a member, is present, and Commissioner Tim Guyan is present. And unless he joins later, Charles Bunton is absent. But we have a quorum, so we should be good to proceed. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen, and that way you all can see what we're up to for today. All right, now this is our PowerPoint, and I know I could put this into the, slideshow version, but I find I get lost and I can't write in it. So I hope all will bear with me and you can read what we've got here.
Sure.
All right, so I wanted to start off, as I mentioned in our agenda, just to give you an orientation of how much work we've done and where we're planning to go. So we've been working on the administrative code for program review, which is what governs how academic programs are reviewed by the commission. And the rules in green, we've done 3 that are in green, were approved by the commission unanimously on September 8th, and they became effective just last week. So those had to do with how we review new program proposals, then post-implementation conditions, and this one actually has a new title, but I snapped this shot before the new title was approved. And then we've got a brand new section on instructional role and units of instruction. And those you'll see if y'all are paying very close attention to the commission documents that you got for this December meeting, you'll see references to the new policies are in there. Now, the ones that are kind of in progress are red. These are preliminarily approved back in September, and they are on the agenda again for final approval. The public comment period closed, and we didn't receive any additional public comments, except one change that was made for distance education, just so that it aligns with actually the new policy that we're going to discuss today, and I'll show you where that is. And the other one was on non-resident institutions. And so far, so good on that one. And then here we are, we're in the orange is what we're talking about today, which is reasonable extensions and alterations of units and programs of instruction is what it's called now. And we'll talk about the changes that we want to make. Okay, all with me so far?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I am hoping that this may be our last change, but we have had some interest from community colleges in particular to maybe look more closely at the off-campus sites, which was something we had intended to do, but given how much involvement this whole process has taken, we were trying to reach a reasonable stopping point, but there may be one more before we can really call it a day on our policy reviews. All right, but this one, which is today's, is going to be about the extensions and alterations. And here's our little overview. Y'all will see this also at the meeting on the 8th if we move forward with this. Extensions and alterations are really what govern all of the information items. So when you see your agenda and it's got all those information items that y'all mostly do as a single approval at the end, those do require us often to make updates to the inventories that we keep and help us with our efforts to kind of keep track of everything that's going on in the academic land with the institutions, including when they're offering non-degree certificates. So these are those kind of short-term packages. They can be at the graduate or undergraduate level. And so the last time this was updated was in 2018. And that amendment made a lot of the sections that required commission approval just become notifications, so information items. And I don't know if y'all were here before the 2018 amendment happened, but if you were, you will find that there were a lot of commission business on extensions and alterations, and that has subsequently been minimized, which we are still trying to preserve that streamlining with the new rules. But the changes are really about observing some of what we've done with other policies, which is moving units of instruction. They already got their own section, so we're taking them out of here. We're talking about language around program status. And some of that is clarified, but also we want to be, if we can, let it go into the next section after this, because it's already treated there. So we keep what we need and then get rid of some other things. There's a big reorganization around the subsections. And I'll show you a diagram in a minute of the organizational structure. The goal is to align with what the institutions need to do for their accreditor, which is the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, SACS COC. And the institutions have to do quite a bit to let SACS know when they are making changes to their academic programs. And SACS's primary aim there is to maintain academic quality and rigor. And there's some mismatch between what AIC needs and what SACS needs, and we've tried to be a little more streamlined so that the institutions can use the same conventions for both places. All right, and then we needed there's a lot you're going to see here in definitions. Okay, so there is another section which actually we had intended to bring forward at the same time, which we didn't. Which is about 300 to 107. That's about inactive status, what makes programs active and inactive. And I should have put a big X across this, but I didn't, because we're not bringing this one forward. We've just, like I said a minute ago, trying to make the changes, only the changes that are needed, and then leave the rest of this 07 alone. Okay. All right, so this diagram took us quite a while to put together with the open forums. So I should say we had 2 open forums on extensions and alterations last year. We've since had 3 open forums on extensions and alterations this year. And a lot of those open forums went through specific language that we'll talk about in a minute. But the initial ones were really about getting the organization of this policy set, which is what's represented on this diagram. So we first got reasonable extensions and alterations. So really when we're making changes to programs of study, and we decided that with the stakeholders in the open forum from the institutions, that there were an important need to separate out the changes that happen to degrees. So those are we put it here as IPED level. These are your long certificates, associate degree, bachelor's, master's, doctorate, and ed.s degrees. So anything that has to go through the program approval process is on this side. And then the other kinds of changes deal with 4-credit non-degrees. Those are your short-term certificates and post-baccalaureate and post-masters. That's what those levels mean there. All right, so the policy is organized around that. So the first section, after we get to scope, responsibility, definitions, then goes into these 3 types of changes that are made to degrees. Substantive requiring approval, so that's where they have to bring it forward to the commission as an approval item. You've seen a few of these come through. They're not very common, but they come through as what you see substantive modification. And that happens probably 3 times a year, maybe, of all the programs y'all review, only a few per year. And that really is when they are making a change that is on par, what we would consider on par with a new program, but with fewer strings attached than the new program. And so that includes splitting a program, merging a program, certain changes to doctoral, and then other changes to program. These percentages, prog changes greater than 50%, program length change. These are described in detail by SACS, and so that's language that's meaningful to the institutions with what they already have to do with their accreditors. And so we decided that it made sense to recommend that the commission require the same level of review that the accreditor would require for some of those significant changes to programs. Then there is substantive requiring notification. So these would be the information items. And largely you can see when a program changes title, it changes its zip code, nomenclature, modality is, did it change from in-person to online, and adding options. Those will still require just notification. We're just describing it in ways that the policy hadn't described it before. And then we wanted to be clear about what doesn't require any change, as in doesn't require a notification to AIG. And sometimes we do get requests from institutions, lots of questions about, well, do we need to let you know about this or what about that? And we wanted to be more clear that we don't need to know when they update courses, minors, small program changes when they're changing less than 25% of the program, and then modality if they add some online components or competency-based components. Okay, so y'all with me so far around the structure? All right.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Great. And on this side, the term for credit non-degree certificate is cumbersome, but we had a lot of discussion about it, especially with the community colleges who offer a lot of non-credit certificates, and they wanted the term for credit in there to make it clear that AIC was not attempting to regulate their non-credit offerings, which we don't, in my opinion, we don't want to get into the business of regulating non-credit offerings because it will be like grasping at the wind. Those things come and go and need to be responsive to the market. And for the non-credits or non-degree certificates, there are only 2 types of changes, so not 3. There's nothing that they would do to non-degree offerings that needs commission approval. If they add them, delete them, change them in any way, that just needs a notification so we can update our inventory. And then there are lots of things that we wouldn't need to know about. Okay. So let me move y'all around here to actually, let me stop sharing, make sure we got everybody, and I'll start sharing again the actual document. All right, can y'all see that document? This should be the same thing that you received by email ahead of time.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. so-
Yes.
Excellent. You can see that there is a lot of blue text on our document, which means a lot of text that was added. And if anybody needed to go back and look at the policy, you will see that there's a lot missing. So really a lot of this blue text is to fill in gaps and describe things that already existed, but weren't actually represented in the policy. So that includes the purpose, the responsibility of the commission, and really the focus here is on the extensions and alterations, which is actually a term that is used in the legislation that gives the commission its authority to review programs. And the main thing that we talked about with our stakeholders was actually this piece here around commission responsibility. So the goal of this is to really for the commission to take a look and decide, is something a reasonable change to a program, or does the change constitute something new? And so part of our, looking at extensions, alterations, whether they're substantive or non-substantive, is really to decide if the commission needs to approve it as a new program. And then we've got to make sure our data is correct. For those of you who haven't spent as much time looking at post-secondary data, it's probably important for y'all to know that AIC maintains this database of student information, and that information is coded by what program the student is enrolled in. And then when they finish, it's coded by which program they graduated from. And those are all matched and verified with the academic inventory. So if there is a program that a student is getting a degree from that's not in the inventory, then at the time that the data is submitted, it creates an error. And that is an opportunity for us to work something out with the institution. Did you code it wrong? Did we code it wrong? And without having an accurate inventory, we wouldn't know if there were errors. So keeping that data, that's one of the primary uses of the program inventory. So when you hear it, I know I'm seeing the eyes glaze over, but this is important for everybody's data reporting. Let's just leave it at that. All right, so scope, we're only talking about our public institutions, and then we go into definitions. So like I was just talking about the program inventory, this is our list with a record for each degree and certificate. So anything an institution could submit a completer, a student who finishes a program, it's got to be on our inventory. And then we talk about, all of this is in alphabetical order. And most of the definitions you see here are taken from standard definitions that appear in the post-secondary, you saw IPEDS, that's down here, Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System. This is established by the U.S. Department of Education, and we all use IPEDS. And so we wanted to make sure that the definitions we've got link with IPEDS and also with the accreditation. Okay, now I've made some notes here based on the conversations that we had during open forum. And so here, this definition on method of delivery, also called delivery modality, this has to do with how a course is actually delivered to a student. And there are three options: competency-based, distance education, and then face-to-face. And the reason we treated these at length was because there have been questions about what to do with competency-based. And in case y'all are curious or know of programs like this, competency-based is when, this is the definition that kind of carries across the page here, where the student doesn't necessarily have to have a certain amount of seat time and show up in class and attendance and all those kind of things, but they demonstrate their performance in the competencies. So that can be in a work-based setting. It can be through a formal assessment. So for instance, just to use an example that's relevant to some of y'all, the CPA exam and the bar exam would both be considered competency-based assessments, because it doesn't matter how much seat time you had necessarily, you still have to pass the exam, and you could pass it with more or less of that exam. So there are starting to be more programs that are competency-based. And so it's considered a modality by the accreditor, and we wanted that represented in here. That is also one of the things that we changed on the distance ed policy. So the one that's coming up for final approval, we discovered this need to account for competency-based. We expanded a definition of modality in that part of the policy so these two match each other. Okay, have I lost you? No, we're good. Okay.
All good.
All good.
All good. Now, here are things that I'm sure have, you've heard us say them in meetings many, many times, and they have not yet actually been written down in the policy of what they mean. Nomenclature. So this is what we call the name of the degree, or the award name. So not the discipline. The nomenclature plus the program title becomes the full name of the degree. So this is where you hear me saying, repeating myself, things like a doctor of occupational therapy in occupational therapy, because the first part, DOT, occupational therapy, is the nomenclature, and then the discipline is also the same. So those two come together to make that formula. Options, program length. I also spent quite a bit of time here on M, program of instruction. And so the degree, and thinking back about the diagram, this is going to become important for the policy when we're talking about degrees and non-degrees. The degree were defined and treated up in that new program. So basically here we've just said, refer back to where we talked about new programs. Those are the degrees. And then this policy spends more time on what are considered for-credit non-degree certificates. We did come up with a name that everybody agreed upon for this very small certificate, level 1A. This is an undergraduate certificate that's 6 hours, so that's 2 courses, but less than 9. So sometimes you hear this called a badge or a micro certificate. We decided that the best name that wasn't going to create confusion for everyone was a mini certificate. This is the very smallest unit. I think we've only entered 4 or 5 of them in the system. They're not particularly common because they're so small. Most of the time, the undergraduate certificates are short-term certificates. And this distinction between A and B, mini and short-term, is something that IPEDS does. And so we wanted to be able to have that distinction for our institutions as well. And we've got our post-baccalaureate and postmasters. Typically, your postmasters is only in certain fields where there's specialized training above the master's degree. Nursing is very common.
Dr. McGill.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question here, because I guess I did not understand. It just sort of, it's dawning on me what I don't want to use the word proliferation, but all of the community college and even 4 years must have a lot of certificate programs that we wouldn't necessarily think about. So there is a lot of them out there.
Well, the commission's policy is, if it is for credit, and you'll see this down below, that they need to let the commission know. They don't need to have commission approval to create one of these certificates, but they at least need to let us know so that it's on our list, the inventory. Because otherwise they would, if they submit a student completed this certificate, if it's not on our list, then that creates a problem.
And persons use this for advancement in a particular job. They've taken related courses that will give them more knowledge and skills. And that's the reason these colleges, of course, and I understand they benefit from it financially, but it does help individuals across the state to get jobs, promotions, because they have extra training, no degree. But so there's a lot of them out there.
There are, but the institutions shouldn't be making them without informing the commission. So hopefully we have all the ones that are out there. In terms of the non-credit, so those are more like enrichment certificates. You might get, say, an OSHA certificate that is like a health and safety. Those don't tend to be at the post-secondary level. And so they are probably offering those without telling us because they don't take academic credit.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. But now that you know that there are all these levels, you'll see in the commission documents where it has, new for credit non-degree certificates. These are all described and the levels are there. And that's to help us with our inventory and receiving the information from the institutions. Okay. All right, program status. So the job of program status is to say if the program is active, and that means it can take new students and graduate students. I would say a good 75% of the programs in our inventory are active. We do keep archival track of the ones that are not enrolling anymore, that are quote unquote deleted. They can teach out the students that were in a program if they decide to delete. And then the other option is inactive. And inactive is when an institution puts a pause on a program. And there are various reasons that they might want to do that. Oftentimes it's because they're reluctant to actually delete it. But if they don't reinstate it in 5 years, it will become deleted. And lastly, this is a new one that y'all really don't need to know about, but we needed to put it in here so institutions understand, which is moved. Moved status is when a program changes its code, and we need the old record and the new record just to keep track of everything. All right. I think also important for y'all to know this one, P, programs that lead to professional educator certification. So these are gaining a lot of interest in the public eye with the Alabama State Department of Education, ALSD, and the State Board of Education. Their job is to authorize new teacher education programs. And our institutions are education preparation providers, and they have to go through a rigorous process with the State Department. And so that rigorous process, you'll see in the policies below, we kind of don't want on the commission's policies to get in the way of that. So there are certain things in the document that only pertain to those programs that lead to educator certification, basically to make it a little bit easier for them to make it through our process. All right. So now we get to the actual policy. So to remind you, this is where we had that diagram with the two parts. So now we're looking at extensions and alterations for degrees. And the black text is what was in the old policy. So we tried to keep what we could. The red under, strike through is what we're getting rid of. And then we've added a lot of blue text. Okay, so here's the substantive changes requiring approval. So again, the reason for that is because these changes are kind of like adding new programs of instruction, except that they don't need to have the post-implementation. So consolidating programs and these conditions that are in black here did come from the original policy with slight modifications to make it more consistent. When you combine two programs, they have to have a certain amount of the curriculum in common. You can't just, suddenly decide that your biology degree and your wildlife sciences degree are the same and move them together. There has to be some kind of overlap. And you'll see from these comments, that there was quite a bit of discussion around some of these. So separating a program, that's when this is where we've seen substantive modifications happening before, where there's a track in a program that wants to become a standalone program. And so now this is described in detail how an institution would do that. Namely, they don't have any additional resources, and they've got to show that there would be viability of both tracks before they can bring it forward. Okay. So curricular changes over 50%, this is something they have to do for SACs. So that could be that they're not changing the title or the CIP code, but something about the curriculum needs to change. We see this with specialized accreditation a lot. The accreditor for, say, occupational therapy will come in and say, we're changing. And this is something that actually is happening right now, where they don't want the terminal degree to be a master's, it has to be a doctorate, and people are changing the degree to have more credits to be a doctorate. So there was an existing curriculum, but it's changing by more than 50%. And so that can come forward as a substantive modification instead of a new program. All right, so this section was a question that I posed to the open forum from the original policy. If less than a third of the curriculum is the same, it will be considered a new program. And we did decide to keep that. So there's kind of a, you know, a threshold. If they cross the threshold, it's definitely a new program. Program length, we wanted the commission, this is a new ability of the commission to review program length. So the accreditor, SAC-COC, said, we want to know about it if the program length changes by more than a term. So if students are going to be going for at least one more term or at least one less term, we want to know. And so we thought, oh, that's a good idea. I think the commission might want to know if the institutions are changing the curriculum to make it go much longer or much shorter than it had done before. The doctoral programs, this was part of the policy, it just wasn't quite described in this way. And the idea here is to preserve the integrity of the research programs. So there's an interest in making sure that the PhD programs, you know, that institutions can't get a backdoor into a PhD program. So they want to be able to review all of the programs that are research focused. Okay. Joint programs and change of program status. And actually, I have filled in some of this language in the document that you'll see in your agenda. So I apologize, but I didn't put it here for you. Because when we set this meeting, I hadn't fully written it out yet, but it is in the agenda for the commission meeting. All right, now we're moving on to a new section, which is about substantive changes to degrees, but this time notification only. So these are going to be your information items. And so basically what we're trying to do is codify what's currently going on. And that's where you see a lot of this text still in black. Addition of options. So those are still going to be a section. And most of this was kept. We did decide that instead of trying to keep track of all changes to options, that really the commission could wanted to make sure, or at least we're recommending that the commission should want to make sure when an option is added, that it has sufficient overlap with the program that's trying to be added to. So it's not a backdoor to a new program. But other than that, we didn't really need to know about the changes of name to options or any of the other many things that they do to options, because those happen all the time and it's very difficult for us to keep an inventory of. The institution seemed pleased that they would have a little bit of flexibility once an option came into being, that they could change the title or delete the option without having to go through the paperwork of letting us know. All right, updates to inventory. This is your title change and SIP changes, but now finally we got definitions to help us all know what we're talking about for these sections. Program status. So this is where we had the change in status, which I mentioned before was going to be its own separate policy, but we're just going to condense it right into here so we don't have to change that other one. So the change in status, including moving from active to inactive to deleted. That is something they can do by information item. This medium changes to curriculum 25 to 49. This is added in new text because the accreditor requires it. And the institution said, yep, we feel comfortable doing this for AIC too. It'll just make it easier if we do the same thing for everyone. All right, and delivery. This is matching what happened in distance ed policy. We only need to know about 100% changes to delivery. All right, and then there's quite a bit of new text here around the non-substantive changes because we want to be clear that we don't want the institutions to do extra work, and I'm sure y'all as commissioners don't want to review all of these things. Minor changes to curriculum, changes to options, most changes to delivery method. Okay. Now, these changes, so these are still under non-substantive. Addition or modification of combination degrees. And we had a little bit of work, that's what all these comments are for, to sort out these definitions. So combination degrees are when an institution has a double major, or what they might call a dual major, where it could be an accelerated bachelor's that goes into a master's, and both programs of study are in our inventory, but the student can be in a cohort that goes faster. And so what we've decided here are, if both programs are in the inventory, then we don't need to know about the accelerated track. All right, dual degrees, that's across multiple institutions. And when that happens, as long as the institutions, if it's 1 degree from one and 1 degree from another, then we also don't need to know about it. And then anything to do with minors. Okay, last one for changes to degrees. So I mentioned before about the educator prep programs, and that's what this one is about, which basically the old text had said, if there is a teacher certification program that involves a degree program, the commission will just add it. It was mentioned just one specific situation, and a lot of times we find with these educator prep programs, they're trying to do a lot for the State Department of Ed, and if we can make it easier for them, we will. Meaning, what we're saying is, ask the State Department what you need to do for them and come to us, and the commission may waive the requirements if it's an educator prep program, basically to just let them go forward and do it sooner. And so the staff will kind of read through it, help them figure out what they need to do, and then make a recommendation to the commission. Okay, y'all with me so far?
Sounds good.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you so
I
much.
feel like I'm just going through all the details when I'm on my open forum with the institutions. They, chime in and say, oh, we don't agree with that or this, or what about this, so I know y'all are less in the weeds than they are. So if I lose you, chime in.
This is much better than before 2018, the change, because I was here and there were a lot of approvals. So this will help a lot.
Good. That's what we want to hear. Streamlining for everyone. But preserving the things that the commission does need to do, which is check in on new programs, make sure they're not trying to offer options as new programs, and so forth. Okay, so I've drawn a big line here, so that we know we're moving into this new section. So this section is about 4-credit non-degree certificates. So this is all the undergraduate and graduate ones. And these, it sets out why we're doing this at all. But also that there are 2 types, like we showed on the diagram: the substantive that require notification. Those are just information items. So whenever they add one, then the commission needs to know about it so we can add to the inventory. And so previously, you can see the text here just noted that these things existed as something that the commission would receive information on, and it defined it. And so we've crossed that out and put a definition above, and then put it in the correct category. If they change one of these, the CIP code, we need to know. Again, that's helped us receive the completers in the right way for the data. The level, this is not particularly common, but it could happen. If you had one of those mini ones and they decided they wanted to expand it to a regular short-term one, then we would need to know that they wanted to change the level. If they want to make anything inactive or change the modality. So these are mostly mirroring what we have to do with degree programs. And then there are a lot more non-substantive. So with non-substantive, if they want to change the requirements, we don't want to know. Changes to the certificate title, as long as it's, in the same neighborhood, we don't really need to know. Or the modality. Okay. And that brings us to the end of the policy. I did want y'all to know what sections we were recommending removing. So the ones that we recommended removing are nomenclature changes for community and technical colleges. We talked about this with the community college system. Basically, this was established at a time when there were quite a few colleges that were changing their accreditation from technical, which has one accreditor, to a community college, which has a different accreditor, and they don't offer the same kinds of degrees. One is an Associate of Applied Technology, and the other one is Associate of Applied Science. And so as colleges were going through this transition, the commission, there did not exist the community college system, and so the commission was kind of being the traffic cop to see were they doing it right. And now that most of this transition is finished, and also the community college system is there, it makes more sense, and community colleges agree, that the commission would just let the community colleges determine how their colleges are changing their degrees, and then bring them to the commission if they rise to a level of a new program. So we would get rid of all of this, which seems somewhat in the weeds. All right, and more of this documentation, how they achieve their candidacy with the new accreditor, so forth. Again, very much the commission being in more of the governing role, which the community college system would need to take. All right, so another thing we took out was addition of education specialist degrees. So in the old policy, it said that institutions could add education specialist degrees by notification based on a resolution from 1984. And we thought that this needed to be taken out because we would want the commission to be able to review the education specialists as a new program of instruction, which is what the legislature gave a viability standard to education specialists. And so, recognizing the legislator's authority, we wanted to make sure that the commission could then put post-implementation conditions on it and monitor those programs. So taking that out. Also, there was quite a bit in here about how you determine reasonableness. And these were, I would say, kind of policy guidelines, things that institutions should be aware of that the commission is doing in its review, and really didn't belong in this kind of definition of how the commission operates. These could be retained in another document that is not the official regulations, but it seemed out of place to have all these questions without policy in the regulations. Lastly, there seemed to be some dispensation for research programs, whether institutions could merge master's and doctoral programs, and it really, frankly, wasn't totally clear what this meant. So we recommended that this be cut out, and then that each change be reviewed as to whether it needs approval or needs notification, and just keep it with the rest of the policy. Okay, and that's it. All right, what questions do y'all have?
I don't have any. You're so thorough.
That's a pretty good explanation.
Well, we wanted it to be
As always, you did an excellent job.
Excellent.
something that would last, and then allow us, the goal that we described to the institutions is that we would be able to give them some guidelines that they could then build processes around, because we do get a lot of business from them, email inquiries. Do we need to do this? Do we need to do that? And there was never really a policy that we could turn to and say, yes, this is, so things have been kind of stitched together. So we want to be able to give them guidelines. And one of those tools that we described to them that would be more or less invisible to you all is to take the accreditation guidelines. They have to do all this substantive change work with their accreditor and just annotate them and say, okay, you have to do this for SAC COC. Now for AIC, here's what you do. And so they would just have a manual. Okay, everybody's together and we all agree that this is how it's going to go. And they were just very pleased that that could be something they would stop having to guess. So, but as far as the commission itself, this really won't change the business that much. You'll still be receiving information items. Like Commissioner Guyan mentioned, we don't want to go back to the days where we were reviewing a lot of extensions and alterations as approval items. But now we feel like we've described the times where that's appropriate, and we should still be keeping it to a minimum. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. So if y'all don't have any questions, you feel like you've got a handle on it and you haven't totally fallen asleep on us, then and I won't be this thorough in the commission meeting itself, since you all are fully aware of all of this. Then I would be glad to take a motion to approve moving this forward to the commission for preliminary approval.
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Okay, so
Let Commissioner Guyan
and Commissioner
motions.
Sherman.
All right, great. Well,
So
again, thank you. I just am ever amazed at the thoroughness, just the detail that you and your staff deal with. I'm like a broken record on that, but this process I've been on this committee has completely opened my eyes. Just we can't appreciate what y'all do enough.
Absolutely.
well, thank you. And I think one recommendation that may come out of this as well is to do a little a guide for the new commissioners to know a little bit about these definitions. So when you're reading the information items and the agenda items, that oh, this is what we mean when we say nomenclature or accreditation or so certainly I'll take your, the questions that you all have given me are times where you seem interested to know what this and that means. We'll hopefully be able to put that into a guide for new commissioners.
Great.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Commissioner Turner, are you happy to adjourn us for the day?
I move that we adjourn successfully.
All those in favor, you can press leave.
See all of you next week.
Yes, thank y'all. I will not be there, but so happy holidays to everybody.
Same to you, Ms. Sherman.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you again, Dr. McGill and commissioners.
Yes, thank you.